and welcome to the panel discussion. And actually, I should start off by saying welcome to the 17th Annual Police Officers Credit Union Conference. A little bit strange that I'm not doing this in person, that I'm doing this from my home office here. Ironically, it was very, very painful for me to try and decide whether to postpone this live conference or in-person conference, but given the fact, and Olivia, correct me if I'm wrong, because one of our panelists lives in the state of Colorado, in the Denver area, but restaurants are still closed. So the Morton Steakhouse, which we will, barring anything unforeseen, will eventually be all joined in person. But for now, we're going ahead with the panel discussion as planned for the 17th Annual Police Officers Credit Union Conference. This is exactly the time that we were going to introduce this session in our agenda if we were in Denver. So darn it, the show goes on, and we're going to continue at least this portion as planned. We will have other portions as we move ahead. Before I introduce the panelists and before I get to the questions, I do want to make a very clear thank you to the Finest Service Organization. Many of you probably have received my email this morning. Vince LeVien from the Finest Service Organization and the Silver Shield Foundation is with us today. And he wanted this to be made available to everybody in the Police Officers Credit Union Conference and wanted to also support our association. So they have actually sponsored this particular online session. They will be also sponsoring our collaboration meetings for the rest of the year, and will also be very integral in what we're going to be doing in the future. There's a couple of things that I talked about in our last online meeting in terms of podcasts and so forth. So I'm really excited about where we're headed. I really appreciate the Finest Service Organization really stepping up to support us. And even more important than that, really appreciate Vinny being with us, because many of you know he's on the emergency task force in New York. He was going to be in an office today joining us. He's actually on a boat on his way to helping more people, but still is going to be on the panel for a little while here with us. We also have two great police partners that have been with us since practically the beginning of our police partner program. We have Olivia Mead, who is the founder and CEO of Yoga for First Responders. I'm not a yoga guy myself, but given all of this stuff that's going on over here, I might need yoga. So I'm interested to hear more about what she has to say. And last but definitely not least, we got Vicki Newman from the How to Love Our Cops, who is doing some amazing things with law enforcement families out there. Really appreciate what they're doing in terms of supporting families that are in the law enforcement community, especially during this difficult time. I mean, you've always helped people during difficult times. This is a real interesting one. This is a curveball. But enough with my intro. Enough with my little spiel here. I want to turn it over to the panelists, and I want to ask some questions that are pertinent to what we're all doing in the Police Officers Credit Union Association in terms of serving our law enforcement families. I'm actually going to start with Vince LeVien, and I'm going to put it on speaker view over here because Vince may or may not be with us for the entire panel because of what he's doing. So I'm going to start with Vince. In this pandemic, in this so-called new normal that we have, what have you seen as the biggest stressors that you're seeing with first responders and their families today?
I have to say, thanks to Keith Stone and the Finest Federal Credit Union, we've been on the ground since the beginning, working with the NYPD and all the law enforcement in New York City, New York State Police, Nassau Police, Suffolk Police, Westchester Police, all of our federal agencies. The Finest Federal Credit Union has been on the front lines helping police officers, and every time I reached out to Keith, he's helped and assisted. You know, the headquarters of the NYPD is 1 block away from the finest federal credit union. So the biggest issue we've had is the PPE that you hear about, the masks that I'm wearing right now. Nobody could get them in the early days of March. It really hit New York right before St. Patrick's Day, about March 15th, March 16th. And we got inundated with hundreds of thousands of people getting transported to the hospitals. None of the law enforcement, none of the first responders had the mask, had the sanitizer, had any supplies to help them. So one of the things, you know, I've been doing on emergency task force that I'm running out of New York City is going out every single day and supplying the mask and the sanitizer and the gloves to all law enforcement, all the first responders, the doctors, the nurses, state police, NYPD, Nassau Police, Suffolk Police, Secret Service, FBI, ATF, CIA, and basically anybody that's responding to this emergency. I'm sure, you know, I just want to point out and thank all the credit unions. I got a lot of calls and emails from police federal credit unions that I've been working with the past 3 years. I've been very humbled by you all reaching out to me directly from Hawaii to LA, to San Francisco, to Chicago, to Maryland, to Baltimore, to DC, everybody, you know, obviously being concerned with what's happening in New York and, you know, making sure that we could help and give other resources that we've been doing and learning in New York throughout the country. I'm sure everybody knows that New York is the epicenter of the COVID-19, not only in the United States, but in the world. We're up to over 22,000 New Yorkers that have been killed by COVID-19, about 50 NYPD employees. Out of that, about 8 NYPD law enforcement, so line of duty death, that active law enforcement, another 40 were employees, you know, everybody from somebody, a janitor sweeping the floor to a crossing aide, FDNY, you know, the doctors, the nurses, all these frontline first responders have literally not only risked their life in New York, but all over the country. And they didn't think twice. So obviously, Ken, you're aware I serve on the Silver Shield Foundation and other philanthropic work that I do. And that's what literally connected me with the finest federal credit union and the finest credit union. Keith Stone has been doing an amazing job on the front line for the NYPD. You know, kill line duty debt protection is basically a coverage that I got connected to a good friend of mine that worked after 9/11 down at Ground Zero. So, you know, we're here on the front lines. You know, I haven't really reached out to any of the credit unions the past 2 months because of the work I've been doing. Kathy Mayo has been amazing, doing great work, reaching out to everybody, and I've been following up with all the great work that Kathy's doing. Thankfully, it's somewhat leveling now. Now we're dealing with just serious issues of people not having food. I'm sure everybody from LA to San Francisco to Chicago to DC, we have over 32 million people that are now unemployed. In New York, the hardest hit cities, in the Bronx, in Brooklyn, and Queens, where people have nothing. You know, the lines are 10, 15 feet, 10, 15 blocks long. So we're now basically pivoted, working with the NYPD and basically helping people feed their families and dropping off food. And the NYPD's done a great job. You know, the finest federal credit union, I have to say again, Keith Stone and his credit union has stayed open. They have not closed. There's a lot of serious financial issues going on right now. And they've been helping with loans and helping, you know, the first responders, the NYPD, and all the other law enforcement personnel that the credit union has. I think everybody's seen how banking has changed, right? I mean, Ken, one of the things I've seen, I'm sure the credit unions are dealing with this, all these paycheck protection loans, every loan was denied by Chase and Bank of America. Mm-hmm. So unless you had a multi-million-dollar account, every small business in the little United States, 90% of those loans got denied by Bank of America or Chase. So I keep on telling everybody, you know, join the credit union. Call up Keith Stone and join a credit union that cares about you and is going to fight for you. You're not going to get the CEO of Bank of America or Chase Manhattan on the phone right now, but you'll get Keith Stone on the phone, and he'll walk you through, and he'll give you a loan within, you know, 24 hours, and he's there for you. I mean, Keith has been on the front line since I met him to every single police officer's funeral. Everybody from the police commissioner on down to the cadet. I mean, that's what Keith does, and that's what all you credit unions do every day. You know, I had the honor to meet Matt Dalton out in L.A. In January and saw the LAPD credit union. I visited Chicago. You know, Scott Arney and Jim in Chicago. Ken, that's where I met you, with Paul McCormick, who's another hero who risked his life after 9/11, is legally blind, and raced into the towers because Maura Smith, one of his police officers, first woman police officer, died on 9/11, was missing. Paul McCormick is the reason why we have the finest federal credit union right now. He was the legendary police officer that fought for years to get this credit union going. So I try to keep it simple. We've been out there every day, to help where we can. And most importantly, we're trying to make sure we're safe. Thank God I've been negative, and came back negative 3 times right now. But I'm not going to lie to you. It's been, I'm literally on a pier right now, waiting to help and get other supplies that are coming in on a boat. That's my day. I was supposed to be in my office, when we contacted each other about 2 hours ago.
Yeah, that's not a green screen background for Vinny over there. That's that's actually where he is in the harbor there in New York. We really appreciate what you're doing, Vinny. Appreciate you taking some time today. And really, too, what you're saying about the finest is really reflected from all of our POCUA police credit unions. Certainly don't necessarily want to make this a POCUA commercial, but heck, we're recording this, and I do a lot of promotion of the POCUA credit unions. Are the primary credit unions for law enforcement out there. In fact, I've said this on social media and other forums for years, that if you're a law enforcement family and you're not working with one of our POCUA police credit unions, then you're just working with an institution that just so happens to possibly work with law enforcement families. So we're all doing a not just a great job, but a special job right now. So we thank you, Vinny. I want to move over.
Yeah, just one thing, Ken.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ken, before I go, I just want to point out, though, every single credit union that reached out to me, they were all reaching out because they deal with law enforcement every day. And again, I just wanted to, on a personal level, I wanted to thank every single credit union, every single employee that reached out to me. They were reaching out more, just saying, Vin, we see what's going on in New York. How you doing? And I think it shows the brotherhood, the sisterhood that the Police Officers Credit Union Association obviously has. I have the honor, I met you in Chicago, then in San Francisco, then in D.C. And I remember meeting, every single one of the presidents and executive boards of these credit unions throughout the country. And it's a beautiful thing for me to see, in my time of need, they're reaching out to see how I'm doing if I need anything. And I think that sets us apart from any other bank that is just cared about their bottom line and making money. This is not what you guys do. You guys are out there every day helping save lives and making sure that, your officers, the men and women of your departments are kept safe and have a financial institution that's backing them up. More now than ever. I see it every day. People are calling me. They lost their job. They lost everything. They can't get unemployment. They're on a food line. They got denied for payroll protection because the multi-billion-dollar bank doesn't care about them because, they're focusing on Steak Shack that has billions of dollars. I think that's what sets it aside, that what you guys do every day. Credit unions are owned and operated by their members. It's not a billionaire that's making, millions of dollars in shareholders. You answer to your members. And that's what sets you guys aside. And our time of crisis and the country's time of crisis, you should all be very proud of the work that you're doing, because there's a lot of people out there that are not doing the work you're doing. And a lot of people are hurting right now because of it.
Great points, Vinny. The question was about stressors, and there's a lot of stressors out there that credit unions are taking care of. I've heard from multiple police credit unions out there that even though the officer is still working, and in some areas, especially like New York, they're working 12-hour shifts. Even here in LA, where the numbers aren't quite as bad, I know that they have at least one center set up for officers working 12-hour shifts so they can get some rest, get a meal, not bring any COVID back home, and go back out into the field. So Yeah, even though our officers are working, though, sometimes we have spouses that have other jobs that are out of work. And I've heard of a number of stories already of police credit unions, our police credit unions in the POCUA stepping up to help those spouses. So that is right on point. Get your mask back on. I saw you take that off. All right, I do want to shift to Olivia real quick because we're talking about stressors. And we've got a ton of them right now, and you have tools that help people with that stress. So tell us, in your work for yoga for first responders, some of the stress that you're seeing for a lot of the first responders that you're working with.
Mm-hmm. I mean, so the biggest, I'm going to get going.
All right, Vinny. All right, we understand.
Oh, Vinny, I want to tell you something real quick, though. Oh, shoot. I was going to tell him my parents live in New York City, so I was going to just give him a thank you because they're right, and they're older. My mom is in her 70s, my dad is late 60s, so obviously they're part of that at-risk population. So I was just going to give him a thank you for that. But
well, he's actually still on. He's just muted, it looks like. Plus this is being recorded anyway, so he heard it.
Okay. Well, Vinny, for later, thank you for what you're doing. Well, thanks so much for having me on. It's interesting. I've been in touch with we have 150 programs all over the country, and almost all of them are postponed at the moment. So I've been in touch with all of the programs, the ones I teach, and my fiance is a retired firefighter, so I've been talking to him a little bit about things as well. And the stressors of public safety and working in public safety are still there. And then there's the added stressors. So you can't forget that what always happens every day is still happening. So I think that's part of it. I also, notice that there's a lot of when the community wants to do something to help, right? And there's another thing is, Vicki, you can probably attest to this too, that, the stress of doing public safety is there, but sometimes the community doesn't realize it. They just expect someone to be there right when they call 911, and they will be. So now, because this is a global pandemic and everyone's feeling the stress, everyone's more aware of the frontliners as well. So what they want to do, and I'm noticing this a lot, is tons and tons, I'm seeing this with the departments I work with, they're getting food donations, more food donations from the community that they could probably ever digest, like eat. And they're wanting to do it to help. But that's not where they need help. That's not the issue. What I teach is how to process stress, build resilience, and enhance performance. That's what yoga is. There's misconceptions out there about yoga. And you heard even Vinny, before we got on, he was joking about it. And you joked about, I'm not a yoga guy. What does a yoga guy mean? Does it mean to you, or to mean to anyone on this call, someone who's touching their toes, someone who's flexible? That's not what yoga is, guys. Yoga is having mental fortitude and a neurological system that can process stress in a way that leads to enhanced performance. So we're teaching those skills anyway. Now, with this current added stressor, what's been taken away are the training tools like yoga, and they've had to because of just distancing, right? The training tools that have been taught or have been starting to be available to cops and firefighters, starting to be available for them to be able to process the stress because of circumstance has been taken away. And so what this added stress is the inability to be able to process it. Now, we're in the middle of the chaos. And that's when we have the adrenaline and the hyper focus. This is almost like a bigger version of an acute everyday call. You're in it, you're working on it, you get the job done. You don't feel the stress because you're in flow, right? You're in it. It's later when it all piles down on you. So right now, everyone might be feeling like, I got to get the job done. I got to get the PEE to people. I got to do this. I got to do that. It's going to be later when we all exhale that the stress and trauma is going to set in. And we must have a tool for them to be able to process it, or we're going to have some bad news. And I'll tell you later in another question about some ideas that I've had. And I want to hear, what Vicki has to say, what you have to say about some ideas about that subject. But that's what I see as the biggest stressor, is what to do with that stress when the acute emergency state we're in is past.
Yeah, that's a great point, because sometimes you have that acute, I won't use the right words, but you have that acute experience, in a situation and so forth, and you have later on you may have some downtime, to process it, talk to somebody, do something with it, but it's every single day in a number of cities here. So that's a great point of what to do with it, and I will circle back to that idea. But I want to get to Vicki in this question. But first, I want to say I'm really, really looking forward to going back to in-person meetings, because I tried to touch my toe when you said that. Nobody laughed. Nobody smiled. I could see everybody here. Granted, everybody except the three of us right now are on mute, so I don't know if anybody had a chuckle. But maybe I'll just stop jokes for a little while. But you probably won't be that lucky. Vicki. Yeah, I want to hear from you, because you're dealing with law enforcement families, especially wives, not only in California, but all over the country now. I know you had a session in Oklahoma that I think had to be postponed, or maybe you did it online. But what are you seeing in terms of the unusual stress for law enforcement families at this time?
Well, I echo what Olivia said. First of all, thank you for having me today. But Olivia said that there are the regular stressors, those are not going away. Those are definitely there. They're present. I would say even for officers, even a little bit higher. I had a police officer tell me the other day that he went to 5 domestic violence calls in 15 minutes. It's unprecedented. And of course, there's the child abuse, there's the sexual abuse. Those kinds of things really wreak havoc on a person, and police officers in particular. The relational piece is very difficult right now. People are in their homes, and you would think that that's a good thing, and in some ways it is. But in other ways, it's not, because a lot of times we don't have good relationships. The things that haven't been talked about are amplified. So I would say relationships, you've got kids who are now home. A lot of the spouses that I'm talking to, they are homeschooling for the first time. They are not teachers. They're going from Zoom call to Zoom call to Zoom call with teachers. It is a juggling act. A lot of them work from the home, but then a lot of them are not home and trying to juggle all, the kids and all that go with them, the disappointments. The kids are actually, missing their friends, acting up at home. The houses are a mess. So you've got officers who, if they come home, a lot of times they are staying somewhere else because you have issues at home, like autoimmune disease. So they're not even seeing each other in some ways. But also, the house is a mess. They haven't done anything, or it feels like, spouses are not doing anything at all. Hey, you got the kids at home, you just put them to work. It's not that easy. It's not that simple. This is completely life upheaval. The other thing that we're seeing out here on the West Coast is we're not having the numbers. LA's a little different, but we're not having the numbers that the rest of the United States are having in different areas. And so there's a low-lying discontent with the way that our governor is working, and in other states as well. We're having officers that are, being put in turtle gear, when you've got protesters at the Capitol that are not your normal protesters. They're business owners, they're churchgoers, they want to meet again. And so there is this discontent, and that is very high. That heightens everything. And then you've got our officers who are in the middle of this, because they're the ones who have to keep the peace. And yet even the peaceful are really feeling a sense of non-peace right now. And so I think that's kind of one of those added stressors of, people are losing their businesses. They are losing their minds. Their savings are dwindled. The financial pressures, we're just beginning to see the impact of that now. And that's difficult. That is, and then we're also seeing layoffs and of our officers in different areas. Here in California, our state workers taking a 10% pay cut. If you have couples, families where the one of them is staying at home and working from the home, that's difficult. That's 10% already gone, on an already difficult budget, one income budget. So the stress is bigger than I've ever seen it. It's a difficult thing. And the problem is that, our officers are in the middle of it. But also our families, they're under it as well, just like everybody else, with the kids at home and the finances and all that. So,
yeah, living here in California, I've seen it as well. I'm certainly not going to make this a political session, but I will say this simply. That I don't remember exactly when it was, possibly 2 weeks ago, when there was quite a large protest in the state capital of Michigan with people with guns and so forth. And I thought to myself, because I'm a small business owner, and obviously through this association, I'm blessed to work with law enforcement, even if it's indirectly. So the first two things that I thought of when I saw that on the news was, we're really, really putting our law enforcement in a rough situation. Many of them that may actually empathize with the protesters, but they also have a job to do in a protest that frankly is already pushing the envelope and kind of in a gray area. So it's a rough one. By the way, I do want to let everybody that is on the session know that if you would like to ask a question as we're going, I will give time at the end if we have time at the end. I will have somewhat of a hard stop at the top of the hour, which will be 11 a.m. Pacific time. I believe that's 2 p.m. Eastern time. But if you have questions that you're thinking of as we're having these conversations, there is a chat feature all the way at the bottom of your screen if you are on a laptop. It's actually, if you see participants, there should be a little bubble, kind of like a cartoon bubble. It almost looks like a text symbol, but it says chat underneath. You can click on that and you can type in a question. I am very pleased that Becky Landis did already type in a statement on the chat saying that she did actually laugh when I tried to do that very, very sad yoga move by touching my toe. Becky, I appreciate that, and appreciate any other comments you want to send in on the chat. But I do want to move on to the next question, and I want to keep Vicki on the spot because of our panelists right now. I think that she can really give some insight into this because as service providers, to first responders, and I want to stress, and I say this to particularly all of my clients that are police credit unions, that yes, we're credit unions, but I truly, truly believe we're providers, service providers to law enforcement first, and then credit unions second. I think that's a very important distinction, not just for branding, but also for our culture and our focus. But as service providers to law enforcement and many of us first responders, what do you think will be the most serious issues that we're going to see with law enforcement families within the next 6 to 12 months?
Well, like like Olivia was saying, a lot of times first responders, cops, they're basically in the moment. And I would say this is true for the families as well. Right now, we're in survival mode. When we're going to start seeing a lot of the issues and the stressors really taking effect in the body, in the mind, in the relationship, is going to be about 6 to 12 months on down the line. That's proven. I've seen it over and over and over again after an officer involved shooting. There's always a delayed response. And so I think you're going to start seeing, these stressors happening within relationships. Hopefully kids will be back in school. That will probably help a little bit because there will be some type of break, but we'll have to see. The other thing that I think is the layoffs and the the financial piece. I think is going to be huge for everybody, but also for first responders. You would think that maybe our officers, of course we can't lay off officers. We need our officers. We're already short everywhere, but revenue. You're all financial people. You understand that tax revenues are based on income. And so the government is going to have less money. And one of the things that's going to happen is we're going to lose jobs for officers and support. And that, I think, is where we all can really help, in this time of just coming up with some tools, some protections for our officers and their families, because we certainly don't want them begging bread. We don't want them standing in food lines. And so that's going to be a big thing. The other thing I think that what will help is my husband and I both say that isolation is the enemy. And right now we're all in isolation. We're out here, we're starting to come out of it. I think there's some other areas that are, people are starting to come out. There's traffic again, that kind of thing. But the connections that we have with each other, the relationships that we have with each other are usually the thing that really keep us grounded, and as well as other things, but relationally, being able to get together, getting hugs. I hate to say it, but a lot of people, yes, this is my new hug now. That one-on-one conversation, I've Zoomed with a lot of my people, a lot of my friends, a lot of, spouses. We started a Zoom gathering that we're doing every 3 weeks, at least through July. And then we're going to probably keep that going because people just want to be a part. They'll bring their kids. They're right there. Their husbands just got off work. He's laying on the couch, and they're listening to just anything, something, some perspective, some different, some education, some resources from somewhere other than in their homes. And we are seeing that is meeting a need, and so we're responding that way. But the human to human contact, going to a yoga class, being able to talk right there, it's very valuable. So I think that's going to help. But that stress that's happening now is not going to go away in 6 months to 12 months without working at it.
Yeah. Great answer and awesome perspective. I thank the good Lord that, my wife and I are fine, and we talk all the time, obviously, and we actually have dinners with the neighbors with some social distancing and everything. So we have that person-to-person contact. But just to your point, and then I want to get a perspective from Olivia. In one of the podcasts that I do, Cool Culture Corner, one of my guests a while back was Dr. Roberta Shaler, who is in California. I think she's in the San Diego area. But she had mentioned how tough this is, even for her, because she's single, she's at home, she's got kids, but they've all been launched and so forth. And right before this, I believe that she parted ways with a long-term boyfriend or so forth. And even with all of this psychological knowledge and understanding what's happening and why it's happening, she even mentioned that it's difficult for her. Nobody comes home to dinner. She can't go out. So that's a serious issue. And bringing it back to law enforcement, especially for some of those folks that may not have kids, and the spouse may be laid off, and the other spouse is working 12-hour shifts. That can be a very, very lonely existence, and those spouses are part of the whole law enforcement family and part of our membership too. So we've got to keep that in mind. So Olivia, what the heck can we do about this? I mean, you're by the way, congratulations. I think I had saw on Facebook that you are engaged. Show us a ring. Do you have a ring? Did this guy give you a ring?
I do. What if I was like, no ring? There it is.
Nice. That's a rock.
Not so bad, right?
Showing that we pay firefighters way too much. Sorry. This is a law enforcement centered show, so we got to take a shot or two.
Of course, he's used to that. He actually proposed in New York City right after I taught a big conference for NYPD. And so that was like right before all this happened. So I'm glad we got to squeeze that in before we couldn't. One thing that Vicki said right at the end there that launches kind of what I want to say is she said, you have to work for it. If we're going to do something about this, you have to work for it. So one of the things I've noticed before all this pandemic happened, just dealing with stress in general, is that a lot of the tools are reactive instead of proactive. Yeah. And so one of the tools I want to give is what's a proactive approach. So when the crap hits the fan, you've got the tools that you need, right? So yes. Even right now, even though like we feel that we are in survival mode, and you don't feel that there's room or there's space or there's need right now for a tool to process stress, this is actually the time to be starting to do it, so that you don't have to like start from scratch in 6 to 12 months when everything kind of falls on you. So I'll give you an example. So the primary practice of yoga, what people believe is that it's the physical, right? We're joking about touching toes and stuff. And that's because that's what's really branded out in the West, is that yoga is a physical practice. Actually, the physical part of it is just one element to get to the bigger goal. The foundation of yoga is actually in tactical breath work. And tactical breath work is what gives us access to our nervous system and our brain and how it functions, and our vagus nerve and our emotional system. So I'll give you an example. Vinny's not on the call anymore, so I'm going to pick on him a little bit.
Go for
it. So for instance, when he's on the boat, right, to go get the supplies that he's getting, he could be doing one of the breath techniques that we teach that actually calms and focuses the nervous system and processes stress out. He could also be doing some cognitive behavioral techniques of mental reframing that changes the stress from a threat kind of a stress to a challenge kind of a stress. There's a neurosteroid called DHEA, and it's part of the stress response, just like cortisol and adrenaline. When DHEA is higher, we actually grow from stress and become stronger and more resilient from stress. For example, someone in a football game, that is stress. There's a lot on the line. They're getting physically stressed. They're getting mentally stressed, but they come out of that game not with post-traumatic stress. They actually come out of that game a better football player. So what's the difference between that and someone on a front line in actual danger is the perception of the threat or the stress that's in front of them. And we can actually, they did a study on this, look up Kelly McGonigal, The Upside of Stress. By changing our thought or our perception, you can actually change the chemical cocktail in the body from post-traumatic stress to post-traumatic growth. There's only one thing that does that: the mind, the thought, perception, nothing else. You can't take a pill for it, only in the mind. So while he's on that boat, he could be doing the breathing, he could be doing the mental reframing technique, which is literally going to change hormone levels. And if he does that daily during the stressors of work, 6 to 12 months later, he's going to be in a better spot than someone who didn't do it. And these are very important tools that are beginning to be adopted and beginning to be understood, but still not at the level of importance and urgency as other things. And I think it's just going to take time. And, you know, for instance, I teach a lot in academies, and you know, every academy is different. Sometimes I get a lot of time with the recruit. Sometimes I don't. But what my argument is, when I argue for as much time as I can get on the schedule, is that what's the use of knowing these tactical skills, knowing laws and knowing regulations, if you're not out in the field to use them, if you're out back at your couch on mental or physical disability. So my argument is the long-term sustainability and resilience of an officer is just as important as short-term urgent tactical skills. So that's the work. It's super easy. I'll say this, it's super simple and easily plugged in. What's not easy is disciplining yourself to learn it and to do it. It's very easy to not do it. And then we wonder why everyone's all bound up, you know, after years of law enforcement or something like this situation. We have to take these tools and take them seriously, and make them tactical so people will do them. And listen, I love jokes about yoga. I take jokes about yoga. I'm not, you know, I make jokes about yoga. I'm not sensitive about it. Yet, the more there are jokes and we laugh off these tools, the more people aren't going to use them. And so we have to, instead of saying, oh, you know, yoga, schmoga, whatever, we actually have to say, no, I do my breath work and so should you. And if we get everyone on the team to do it, I think we're going to see more resilient officers.
Interesting. By the way, did you copyright Tactical?
I actually got it from someone else, so I can't.
After the session, I'm gonna look up the trademark. It's actually more of a trademark office and see if it's there. So just real quick to kind of stay on this subject, you mentioned, which unfortunately is true, there's a number of people that won't be doing the breathing, doing some of these techniques right now. Given that is the case, 6 to 12 months from now, when we do have an officer and a family that's stressed, what might they do then, even though they didn't heed your advice and do it now?
Well, it's never too late to start.
Sure.
Just start, you know, and again, that's the hardest part. It's not the technique. It's the actual starting. Listen, I'm the yoga person. I'm preaching this stuff. I'm studying this stuff. And this morning I looked at the time was kind of tight and I forgo my practice this morning. I want to do it later, but of course the later it gets in the day, the more we put stuff off. We just don't do it in general, right? So even me, who's totally, as you can see, passionate about doing it, I still fall into the trap. You know, I still fall into the trap of putting it off myself. So I 100% get it. I think something like, if you found a technique that you liked, I try to keep it really short and simple so it's actually achievable. I do a 20-minute practice a day, boom, that's it. But if you can find that and then say, I'm going to do this, give yourself something realistic, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or I'm just going to do it for 30 days and then see what happens. Maybe giving yourself some parameters around it versus I'm going to try this and it's sort of open-ended. We know that none of us, you know, achieve anything that way. So trying to make you know what's really good about this time, and we're actually doing this, starting to do this with yoga for first responders too, is I love the online courses that have come out of this, because I'm actually studying with one of my previous yoga teachers who's in Bali now, but he put an online immersion on the, you know, online. And it gives me that structure of, okay, every day I have a 20-minute lesson and a 20-minute practice, right? So I think that's another thing that's kind of the issue too, is with so much training in law enforcement, it's structured. But then when it comes to anything about wellness or resilience, it's left very conceptual and not really tactical or structured. And so it's so easy to be like, oh, here are some good ideas. Try this, this, and this. Is anyone going to do a good idea? Probably not more, and not out of their best, effort. It's just that life is life, because life is so, difficult to begin with. We have to put ourselves on a proactive, resilient schedule. Just like I always equate this stuff to like oral hygiene, like brushing your teeth. We were taught when we were little to brush our teeth. And I don't remember my mother saying to me, you know what might be a good idea for your long-term wellness is if you brush your teeth, consider it. No, my mom said, march in the bathroom and brush your teeth. So we need to be telling our officers and our recruits in training, march in there and do your tactical breath work. And if we handled it that much more structured, I think, it would actually be done. So for someone who wants to start at 6 to 12 months later, I just heard that there are some techniques or there's some great suggestions I can do. If there isn't a structure for you in place, make a calendar and make the structure for yourself. Put some incentives on there, whatever you need to do that's your driving force to actually get something done.
Interesting. To stick with the analogy of get in there and brush your teeth, much like when I was a child and I got slapped upside the head when I didn't do that, can we do the same for the officers not doing their breathing?
That's my technique. Yep, that's my teaching
wow,
technique.
You're probably the only one that can get away from slapping an officer upside the head and not get tased. Is this on recording? Anyhow, at least you laughed at that. And I see
I'm
Vicki
sure
smile.
I'm sure a lot of my students have wanted to tase me, believe me. They offered too. And cause I went through some classes at the police academy with my recruits, and they're like, okay, time for like the OC spray and tasing. And I'm like, I'm busy that day. Sorry.
I think I'll take a pass.
Yeah.
To switch gears a little bit, and a little bit of a step back to kind of give some insight into the planning that goes into the annual police officers credit union conference. Anyway, I love doing these panels. It's one of my personal favorite parts of facilitating these conferences. And one of the things, because I do take it seriously, I deliberately wait almost till the last minute to come up with the questions for the panel, because I want them to be as relevant in the times as we're in. And I guarantee you, when I first asked Olivia and Vicki and Robert and even Vinny to be on this thing, if I had written out the questions, then they would have been very, very different than the ones that I'm asking today, especially given the original theme of the conference. But I want to move on to the next question here, and I'll call on Vicki because I want to hear her perspective first. Would have loved if Vinny was still on the call, or if Robert Michaels was able to join us from Serve and Protect. I would have loved to have heard their answers on this. But Vicki will give us a very insightful answer as well, because one of the things that I'm noticing is one of the very few good things that seem to be coming out of this right now, at least this is what I'm inferring, is that there seems to be a grouping of many professions: police officers, firefighters, EMTs, healthcare workers, frankly, even grocery store workers, delivery drivers, as being these heroes that are all, still busting their asses and doing things to keep things rolling and to save lives and to keep people safe. And I think that's great. I think that is definitely rightfully so. And what I'm hoping, and I'm also seeing, is that with police officers being put into this bubble, per se, that it's possible that some of the anti-cop sentiment that we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years seems to be dwindling. And my hope is that that will go away, that the coronavirus will kill that too. But Vicki, are you seeing some of the same, especially, given your husband Brent Newman has been a high-ranking official in the California Highway Patrol for so long. He's retired now. Happy retirement, Brent. But are you seeing some of that? Are you seeing some of that anti-sentiment going away, or am I just crazy?
I have a little different perspective. Sure. I think that there are definitely groups, loud groups of people who do not like cops, will not like cops, and that sentiment will not change. The Black Lives Matter whole movement, it is a very, very tricky, different thing. We don't hear from them as much, seems lately, but we have out here, and recently. So we're still hearing that kind of thing. As spouses, when we every year we do a fundraiser in the fall, and we call upon our community to come in and be a part of an event, a night with our law enforcement. And so we're reaching out to businesses, large and small, and we see a very positive willingness to help, kind of what Olivia was saying earlier, of just, the general community as a whole, what I call the silent majority. They love officers, and that is why they are included in this group of, healthcare workers and EMS and firefighters, and that's why they're included, is because they are out there and they are trying to help people and make a difference. Then you've got, kind of the thing where, well, this person was stopped just because they weren't social distancing or the protesting type of thing. That doesn't help. But I don't think that is making a difference either way. Kind of an interesting thing. I was looking at kind of the feed. There's an officer that from Seattle that had posted that our officers should not be arresting people for their rights, and the comments were, "Oh, there's the last good cop," and those kinds of things. So it's very interesting. I think it's just different people and their perceptions. I think as long as we have a general attitude out there, and this is what you're talking about, I think that does help dissuade people from, really, really, protesting cops and out there like that. But then you have a shooting that's gone awry, and then it's all back up. So it's one of those low-lying levels. You're going to have some people who just will not, they won't change their minds because they have an inherent belief of our officers that, I don't believe is correct. But, perception is reality for everybody, really. So, yeah, I'm not sure. I think that kind of is to be seen. And by the way, I did see appliance repairmen as being one of those. I saw a commercial last night about appliance repairmen being, people who are heroes.
Oh yeah, hey, when your freezer goes out or your toilet, starts overflowing and it's your only bathroom in a pandemic.
Then they're a hero.
I'm sorry, but that's a freaking problem. So yeah, they could be in that bubble. That's not a problem. Speaking of bubble, I was hoping for something a little bit more positive, Vicki, that you were gonna say,
sorry.
Yeah, it's all gone away, it's all good now, and now I could be depressed for the rest of the day.
I would very much like to say that, Ken. I really would. I think it's been better than we thought all along. I really do. There's that silent majority that do support our officers. They do. Yeah. So.
Yeah, now that I'm in a negative mental state, I'm gonna have to breathe and
Ah,
something, like Olivia said. But while you were speaking, Vicki, Tom in our audience had asked if you were talking about National Night Out, if that was a reference in what you were just saying.
National Night Out. Is that the from Police Week, the
Uh,
virtual Police Week?
I will actually unmute Tom so he could ask directly. Tom, were you referring to National Police Week?
No, I was referring to an event each year where the police meet with groups of citizens out in the community and move from group to group to group and just have regular conversations and show their vehicles and all that kind of stuff and just try to get to know people. And it's called National Night Out.
We have our organization has not been a part of that, but I would say it's very similar. Ours is usually a fundraiser, but we have the police vehicles, we have uniforms, and people are just like in awe. And they get to, rub shoulders with other law enforcement officers, either in uniform or out of. And we have just seen that to be a very positive thing. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
He's nodding. Terrific. Olivia, do you have some perspective on this? I know that you're definitely about to be a first responder wife, given that you're the fiance of a retired firefighter, but you work with police departments all over the country. So do you have a perspective on this adding police officers to this hero pedestal and the possibility of that maybe lowering the anti-cop sentiment out there?
Ken, it's gonna all be fixed. I'm just kidding. That's a joke. It's what you wanted to hear.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's what I thank you.
I wanted to say that.
Yeah, thank you. That's don't tell me the truth. Tell me what I want to hear. As I'm breathing.
Well, gosh, it's so, as Vicki was alluding, it's so complex. I mean, now we're getting into human behavior, and human psyche, which you just can't. I mean, there's some things that you just are unexplainable, and so it's a really difficult question. What I will say is, in general, when you're experiencing, there's personal stress, like if something happened to me, I have an overdue bill, whatever, that only I'm feeling. And then there is global and community stress. And one of the parts of the stress response, I already talked about the threat response, the challenge response. Another response of stress is tend and befriend, it's called. So we have rest and digest, we have fight or flight, and then there's tend and befriend. And the reason that's part of the stress response is the stress response is actually also built to regulate from stress, to help yourself get out of it. That's why when we shake, when something bad happened, we start shaking, that's actually the nervous system trying to, balance out the hormones. So what the tend and befriend response does is actually elicit the oxytocin hormone and dopamine. So when we give hugs, which you talked about before, that gives a burst of oxytocin. It makes us feel good, which is why we want to do it again. Some of us aren't huggers, which is fine too. But just communicating, talking on the phone, looking at people, that actually brings a hormone out, which is why we like doing it. So what's another thing, and not to get too philosophical here, but difficulty and stress actually also have a beautiful layer of opportunity. And it's also important to find those pockets of opportunity within stress because they are there. They're built in to be there as part of human existence. So I think that one of those beautiful opportunities of this is the coming together, the communication, the creativity that's come out of this. Okay, we can't meet in person, so what are we going to do instead? Being able to bond. When this all first happened, I walked my dog, and this is when everyone was really supposed to stay strictly inside. And someone was on their fence and kind of looked up and waved to me. And I didn't know this person. It was like a neighbor or whatever and they would have not done that in a normal circumstance. But in this circumstance, we could relate to each other. It's like we were all friends. We were all family. We were like, hey, you, I see you. We're in the same situation. So if anyone, let's not even go to anti-cop. Let's just say cop neutral. Like, they're there. They'll help me if I need them, whatever, right? I think seeing them now, maybe there's a little bit more adoration than when there was neutrality. So maybe those who were not happy with cops maybe have started to rise up from that. I don't know. I'm just saying that I think that community bonding we're all feeling could do nothing but help that. I lived, a lot of people are saying this is sort of the 9/11 of this generation. And I lived in New York City during 9/11 and was in New York City on the day that it happened. And I wrote a little bit about this, and I'm writing a book right now, and you'll hear a little bit more about it then. But the one thing I really noticed was the bonding that happened of all of us New Yorkers during that time. You could drop a wallet with, $500 in it, and someone would immediately return it to you. And I went to school right next to a firehouse, engine 54, ladder 4. And there was a firefighter that walked out, and he and I just looked at each other, and I went up and I gave him a hug. And this was like a week or so after, and he hugged me back, like knowing exactly why. You can't really do that, normally. But this was just like, there was this knowing of we're in this together. So instead of, there's a brother and sisterhood in law enforcement. And I think that brother and sisterhood is now expanded to your neighbors and to, community. So I think that can nothing but help.
Yeah.
And there may be another situation, like Vicki said, that'll turn it back the other way for a while. I don't know, but we can only hope that we can all find the opportunity and silver linings in difficult situations.
Yeah, so many great points. It's interesting. My wife works in healthcare. She does not work in a hospital. She works in a very large office building, in a stressful healthcare related job. And when this pandemic started, at least 80% of the folks that work in that office building were sent home to work, to telework, because for obvious reasons. So she still goes to that office building, but she's probably one of the 10 to 15% that's still there. I mean, you talk about social distancing. She's probably got 24 feet between her and the next human being over there. But it's interesting, as she's been coming home for dinner, and we've been sitting talking about our day. One of the things that I noticed that I mentioned a couple times just in these past couple weeks is, ironically, I noticed that you're coming home considerably and notably less stressed in the last 2 months than you have before. And, first she said, really? And she kind of thought about it. And she thought about it and says, well, there's a few reasons for that. Probably one, because in any office building, and much like restaurants, you want to make the most money out of your space. And everybody's, kind of on top of each other. And, you've got a stressful job and you're on top of each other. So it creates, unnecessary backbiting and things of that nature, figuratively, not literally. And then the other thing that she mentioned was the fact that people can't just walk to her office and ask a question. Physically, they have to do a little bit more. They've got to pick up a phone or send an email or an IM or something. But the third thing that she mentioned was, what? I just noticed that all of us are being a lot more tolerant and empathetic of each other, that we're all going through something very difficult. We either have patients that have coronavirus that we're trying to work with. Some have spouses that are out of work. Some actually do have COVID-19, that are sitting at home trying to recover from this. So to your point, Olivia, of that people understand, much like 9/11, and there's an empathy that we're all in this together. I think that is helping a little bit. I would say that, and I've said this before, that I truly do believe that to be simplistic about this, that there's three groups in terms of how they think of cops. One group is they love them no matter what, and will even, frankly, make some excuses for them in some situations where maybe it could be questionable. And then you've got the other extreme that, no matter what you do, police officer could save their life and they'd still be anti-cop. And then you have this group, like you alluded to, Olivia, that's somewhere in between, that's kind of cop apathetic. They don't hate them, they don't like them, it's just another job or what have you. I think that it's that group that is coming over to the other side right now. And it would be nice if we could keep that 2/3 ratio out there in the country. But we have 9 minutes left till the top of the hour. So I want to get to our last question, and then we also have one in the chat. So I will try to get to that. But Vicki, I will start with you on this last question. Given everything that we've talked about, also given your understanding of what the POCUA stands for in terms of being a service provider to law enforcement families, what can our credit unions be doing to connect with their members and be able to add value, especially given your expertise, to police officers and their families out there?
I was thinking about this. I'm not sure on specifics, but
well, then I'm going to mute you. If you can't be specific, then we'll go on to Olivia. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. The thing about law enforcement families is it's all about trust and being safe. And we are used to having, people not like us, right? I mean, it's part of that. And then, of course, our officers try to keep us safe and make sure that we lock the doors and head on a swivel, and they sit with their backs against the wall in a restaurant. It's all about trust. And I think for credit unions, as you're thinking about how you can make a difference in a law enforcement family, it's all about trust. And it's about offering an attitude that says, thank you, and how can I help? Helping the helpers. Also, we need to know that you have our back. And we're coming upon some uncertain financial times, even in law enforcement. And which is, no shortage of need out there, but the money, it's all about the money. So I don't know how to run a credit union, but I would say that whatever you do, have that opportunity of saying, we have your back. And, and I don't know what that looks like. But and then trustworthy. If you say that you're going to do something, especially being with POCUA, your credit unions, our credit unions in this association are dedicated to officers and their jobs and them as people. And so that's huge. What are some ways that you can communicate that? Coming from as a business. And I think this is part of it. We are changing up our thoughts as far as how to love our cops. We've got resources. We believe that people don't have all the information. Our families certainly don't have. We need tips and books and yoga and serve and protect, and people to call when there is a crisis. These organizations that come alongside and with their creative ideas and say, we have your back, and we love you, we care for you, and therefore you can trust us. And so I know that that's not really specific, but I think the attitude is probably just as important as a program.
Yeah, you know what? I think it's more specific than you give yourself credit for. And I don't have the time to call out every POCUA credit union because I've seen the type of sentiment that you were talking about with each and every one of them because I'm on all their Facebooks, and some of them I don't talk to as much. Others I'm in pretty close contact with, but as Vinny alluded to, I know Keith's on Facebook Live all the time talking about what they're doing. Vicki Landis with her Come On Home campaign, Police Federal Credit Union of Omaha with their Blue Family and everything that they do with that language. I could go on, and I'm certainly not trying to leave off any of the POCUA credit unions, but just in the sake of time, and also given my 50-year-old memory, I can't think of any more right off the cuff, but all of them are doing some great things. In our last 3 minutes that we have, Olivia, from your perspective, other than doing huge yoga classes for first responders at every single one of our POCUA credit unions, what else could our institutions be doing to connect, to really support and add value to our first responders during this time?
Hey, that's actually not a bad idea, because we don't hold yoga classes in yoga studios for our officers. We come to them in department. So actually having it, at a location is a great idea. But I think it sounds like, and I know that the attitude of that personal connection is already there, which is fantastic. When I was living in Des Moines, Iowa, and we had a terrible tragedy with a couple of our officers and a shooting there, we did a fundraising yoga class for their families with our credit union there. And so they were very supportive of that, and I could tell they're a really great partner with that. So that was excellent. And I think that, if I were to have an idea, if I were part of a credit union, I would probably maybe give an email, give a resource. Here are 5 specific things we support and want to give you to help you. And I don't know what sponsorship could look like, but let's say it's like, here, we're giving you this book, right? We recommend this book, and our credit union has bought it for all of our members, right? Through Amazon. I don't know. So here's a book. 2, here's, I saw, coming to lead you guys in a breathing session, which I absolutely will do, and I'm planning on doing it. Here's a 5-minute breathing technique video right here. Here it is for you. 3, here's this resource. So I think Vicki was great with that energy and that feeling that's there. And then add those very specific offerings of almost like, not saying it in the negative way, but spoon feeding it. Like, here it is for you. I don't need you to go find it. Like, I'm going to actually give you the book I recommend. I'm going to give you the breathing technique I recommend. I'm going to give you this TED talk by someone that really changed, the life of someone in our credit union, and we want to pass it on to you. So using the partnerships that, this association has brought together, and people that, I mean, gosh, now I have new friends and everyone here that we can bring all our missions together. I think that we're stronger together. So I want to use all of you, and I hope you will use me as a resource to help move forward whatever mission you have.
Great way to kind of wrap this up, Olivia. I really appreciate it. And I agree with you 100%. I think in some ways, as unfortunate as this COVID-19 pandemic has been, at least I could say personally, has made me think of some different avenues, especially some different ways that we could roll out and increase the soundness initiative, which we've talked about for a while now, but really couldn't find the right venue or avenue to do it. And I think I've got some better ideas through this. And thank you to for everything that all of you are doing out there. I sincerely thank Vinny for being with us for a little while this morning. Even though he had to leave us to do more important work. Olivia and Vicki, thank you so much for taking an hour to an hour and a half out of your day, really providing some good insight. Thank you for the heart hug. I'll do that. I won't necessarily start breathing or touching my toes, but I could do the hand heart thing. But thank you to both of you ladies for being on with us today. A lot of great insight. This would normally be the time where I say, lunch is now served and available.
But it's in your kitchen. Go to your kitchen. There's lunch there.
Kitchen, go to your break room, get a piece of jerky out of your desk, whatever it is that you're going to chomp on. Really wish that I was there in person with all of you, whether it was folks that were here live with us or watching the recording later. We will, barring anything unforeseen, we will have an in-person session. Need to find out when those Colorado restaurants and hotels will allow some gatherings again. Looking at the fall time frame right now, but there'll be more updates on that. But I will close with just saying, God bless all of you. Please stay safe. Please stay healthy. And thank you to all of you for what you do. Take care and have an awesome day.
Thanks for having us, Ken.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.